So the first game of the Kalen DeBoer era is in the books, and the Crimson Tide came out swinging. But it didn't take long after the big win for Alabama to get massive news regarding Kadyn Proctor and an update on his injury, something we need to talk about. But we also need to discuss what we saw on Saturday, what stood out, what impressed. We're here to break it all down, but before we can, as always, y'all know the drill, I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no. Were you excited about what you saw on Saturday? Let me know what stood out, and then let me know what you think about the update on Kadyn Proctor. I can't wait to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it, and if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And we're going to start with the update on Kadyn Proctor per Matt Zenitz. Because per Zenitz, he states that this injury outlook is week to week as opposed to long term, which honestly should be music to the ears of multiple Alabama fans. I'm not exactly sure what the injury was, and I'm not going to speculate, because I'm no insider. I'm just a fan with a microphone that talks into a camera, rants, raves, the whole 9 yards. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I think it's this or that, because in my opinion, it's dangerous for someone in my position to do so. But what I can say is that I'm very glad to hear that this isn't a long-term injury, something that had him out for a month and a half, because Alabama's offensive line already looked better than what we saw last year. And I understand. You can hit me back with, but Ty, it's just Western Kentucky. I'm not talking about looking better in terms of sacks or anything like that. I'm talking about the scheme that was employed. That's where I'm going with this. That pin and pull scheme that we saw on Saturday led to explosive plays. Go back and watch. You have the Jalen Milroe rushing touchdown. You have the Haynes long run. That offensive line was being able to get out in space and utilize their athletic ability and tenacity out in space. And I think it's going to be a really fun year watching this offensive line, but I also think Kadyn Proctor is going to take them to another level. When we look at Kadyn Proctor last year, there were times where he really shined, but he was young. He was a freshman going up against SEC competition. And in my opinion, the whole offensive line was a little bit too big last year. Well, they've all slimmed down. They've transformed their bodies to be able to accommodate this new pin and pull scheme. That way they can play in space. And I think Kadyn Proctor's a guy that's going to be a key piece. He wasn't a go during spring because he wasn't in Tuscaloosa after having transferred to Iowa and then transferred back. But it didn't take long once he got back for him to re-win that starting job. And in my opinion, that's telling, because it's not like the old staff was here. And it's not like they were the guys that had recruited him. There was a brand new staff in place. That new staff owed no allegiance to anybody. It was all earned. And Kadyn Proctor earned that starting job back after not being around for very long. So I'm really excited to hear that his injury isn't going to be long-term, that it's week to week. Hopefully by Wisconsin, he's a go. I think if you have the ability to play him against USF, you're probably being precautionary. You sit him out, you keep developing depth on that offensive line, and then you play him during Wisconsin to get ready for UGA, because that's going to be the real big test for Alabama early season, especially with this new scheme. But there are some teams that you cannot overlook, such as USF, such as Wisconsin. I think you hold him out this week, play him against Wisconsin, and that's assuming he's good to go. But regardless, great news per Matt Zenitz, and I know Alabama fans are going to be very excited to hear that. But now, let's turn our attention to what we saw during the game. I've already briefly talked about the offensive line already looking better. Once again, in case you went to go get a drink and you missed the first time, I'm not talking about in sacks allowed. I'm talking about scheme employed. That pin and pull scheme already looks like it's going to be a ton of fun to watch. It led to explosive plays, and I can't wait to see how it continues to develop, because that was game one. This is a brand new system for these guys. And game one, as the game progressed, you saw things start clicking on all sides of the ball. Let's talk defensively, because Alabama pitched a shutout as they beat Western Kentucky down 63-0. But Alabama also didn't allow for Western Kentucky to have over 150 yards total, which is hyper impressive because whenever we're talking about Western Kentucky, this is a team that's had immense success on the offensive side of the ball. Their head coach knows what he's doing in that department. Anybody that has watched football, that knows football, knows Alabama should have won this game. No doubt about it. But they also know that Western Kentucky has been a solid offensive football team. And Alabama was able to nullify that. The only thing you could criticize about Alabama's defense on Saturday night is that Western Kentucky had that long drive where they kept converting third downs. They converted some fourth downs, but ultimately the drive didn't result in points. And the one thing I will say to that is that the Alabama defense did a great job of keeping everything in front of them. They weren't getting beat deep. They were allowing some over the middle, some short things where they knew, hey, you might get a 1-2 yard gain here, but we're going to shut it down. Once you get into the red zone, you're not getting anything. And especially after that long drive, it looked like the things that were hurting Alabama on that drive, maybe some out routes, maybe some short things over the middle where someone dropped a little bit too deep into zone, they largely fixed that up the next time Western Kentucky came out on offense. But just like we talked about with the offensive line, it's a brand new defensive scheme for these guys, especially on the back end where you're going from pattern match to vision and break coverage. And speaking of vision and break, Keon Sabb with 2 interceptions. Almost had 3. Deontay Lawson almost had an interception, and on one of those Keon Sabb interceptions, had he not intercepted the ball, I feel very strongly that Zabian Brown would have. So that new coverage scheme is already showing, hey, yes, Nick Saban isn't here. Nick Saban's like the GOAT of defensive back coaching in college football, but this new scheme, it has its perks. Just like everything, you have pros, you have cons. In this new scheme, the pros is that you get to have your athletes play in space and play a little bit quicker. It's not as difficult to pick up. And we saw Keon Sabb make 2 big plays. Nearly had that 3rd interception. And then Deontay Lawson should have had an interception that would have resulted in a pick 6. So the defense already looks like they're picking things up, but we have got to remember, and I bring this back to that one long drive by Western Kentucky, that it's a new defensive scheme. They are still learning it. It's one thing to do this in practice. It's a brand new thing when you're playing an actual team. When now practice is ended, this isn't a scrimmage. Because during scrimmages, during practice, you've seen the same thing over and over and over again against the same guys. Well, now you're against a totally different team, against totally different guys, and they're going to try totally different things to attack you. So now you have to take what you've learned in practice and apply that to the brand new. So this was always going to be a learning experience for Alabama's offense, for Alabama's defense, for the coaching staff, and boy did they pass it. 63-0, gaining 600 yards on offense to Western Kentucky's 145. That is hyper impressive. And I was impressed by every level of the defense. I thought the linebackers played really well. I thought Jahad Campbell looked sensational. I thought Quay Russaw looked sensational. Sabb looked sensational. Red Morgan, as he continues to develop, looked great. And if I didn't say your name, you probably still had a great day. James Smith up front looked dangerous. LT Overton, once he's fully cut loose, is going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem. Now, Damani Jackson had a few plays that actually made me giggle on the couch, and my wife had to ask me what's so funny. On several occasions, Western Kentucky would try and do some trickery on the outside with their wide receivers to confuse the young defensive backs, which is smart. Why wouldn't you? You know, hey, Alabama's defensive backs, otherworldly in talent, which we said all offseason. Not once was the question how talented they are. The question is, how fast are you going to be able to get up to speed? Well, Western Kentucky acknowledging, hey, you might be talented, but you haven't seen a whole lot. Let's show you some more complicated concepts. Let's show you some switch routes. Try and confuse the young guys. Didn't work. And on more than one occasion, whenever they would try that, Damani Jackson would jam his wide receiver almost straight off the field. And then, even after the jam, he runs a 10-2-5 100-meter dash. So he would jam these guys, they'd almost fall down, and then he's running in stride, and I'm sitting on the couch laughing. Loved what I saw from this secondary, and it's only going to go up from here, not only for the secondary, not only from the linebackers, not only from the defensive front, but the entire team. It's game one. There's still going to be a lot of learning as this goes on. Let's talk about the offense. We already covered the offensive line, the pin and pull, how successful that was. I do want to give a shout out to Parker Brailsford. There was the one bad snap. I'm going to be overly optimistic here and chalk that up to the field being wet. Right? There was so much rain pregame. It's possible that the field was wet. It was a one-off because if you watch him at Washington, he didn't have errant snaps. He didn't have bad snaps for the entirety of the game, except for that one. I'm comfortable with saying it was a one-off. But I know, Alabama fans, that's a little bit of a tough subject to talk about after what happened last season. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with Parker Brailsford is actually something on a play that got called dead. Because even though the refs called it dead, the Western Kentucky defender kept pursuing, kept trying to rush on Parker Brailsford. And as Parker Brailsford was engaging him, after about a second of it, you could tell he had enough. He threw him straight out the club. Every Western Kentucky defender was begging for a flag, and I was laughing on the couch. A lot of people questioned his size. Not me. I can go back and show you what he did against Texas, what he did against Michigan, what he did all year against Oregon, against anybody they put in front of him. The kid can play ball. And now when you look at that interior three, Parker, Jaden Roberts, Tyler Booker, that's dangerous, especially in this pin and pull scheme. But you also have to acknowledge what happened on the outside with the wide receivers. Already, the effort looked better. The blocking looked better. Those guys were excited to block for each other. Shout out Emmanuel Henderson. Ryan Williams looks to be exactly the type of player we thought he would be. And even then, I was still impressed. I've been talking up Ryan Williams for months now, since he was first committed to Alabama, and still I was impressed by his outing. Because he's only scratching the surface. That guy's going to be a problem as he continues to learn from Coach Shepard. Remember, he's 17. Jeremy Bernard looks to be a welcome addition. Kendrick Law showed you on that touchdown just how dangerous he is. Jalen Milroe looked much better, especially as the game went on, and you could tell that he was really still processing a lot of this new information. He had some solid throws. He had a corner route where he hit Jeremy Bernard, and it was a perfect throw. Put it high, that way that the cornerback couldn't come back and try and intercept it. Led him straight out of bounds. Easy pitch and catch. That was a nice throw. The touchdown to Ryan Williams, one of the things I loved is if you watch Jalen Milroe's helmet, he went through his progressions. He was going through his progressions, found the open guy, hit him, Ryan Williams touchdown. Love to see it. You love to see the evolution. And he looked willing and dangerous as a runner. This new offense is going to be great for him. And then we talk about Ty Simpson, who everything we've ever said about Jalen Milroe, now that Jalen Milroe has access to a caliber of quarterback coach and a caliber of offensive mind that Alabama has not had since 2020, all of that applies to Ty Simpson, to Dylan Lonergan, to Austin Mack, though Austin Mack is a little bit more of a nuanced conversation because Austin Mack had access to that at Washington. Dylan Lonergan, Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, they didn't. All of those guys are going to benefit. It's not just relegated to Jalen Milroe. Every single quarterback on Alabama's roster is going to benefit. Then you talk about the running backs, and Alabama's running back stable looks completely as advertised. It was great seeing Kevin Riley get in there and run, Daniel Hill get in there and run. You had so much rotation in this game, and that's a great thing. This staff realized they had an opportunity here. They were winning so handily. Hey, let's develop a lot of young guys. And they did. The edge rush room looks dangerous with the addition of Noah Carter. He looks like he's going to be a dangerous player as he continues to learn. There's so much to like. And I cannot wait to see how they go into the USF game, because that was a game that gave them some problems a year ago. And let's be honest, one of the reasons I'm so excited about that game is the offense USF runs. Alabama will see an analogous offense against Tennessee, and Nico looked good. I know some Alabama fans won't want to hear that. And I get it. It was Chattanooga. Sure. But just like you can take away things from the Alabama game against Western Kentucky, you can take things away from that Tennessee game. Nico looks good. That's why it's so important that Alabama goes and plays USF well and learns during USF about this veer and shoot offense, especially for the young guys in the secondary. I don't think people realize what a positive experience this USF game is going to be for this young secondary. Getting acclimated to veer and shoot before you go play Tennessee, I couldn't be more thankful that USF is early on the schedule. But I couldn't be more thankful that football is back, and I can't wait to hear from all of you. Let me know what you think about Kadyn Proctor's injury. Let me know what you think about what you saw on Saturday. Heck, let me know what you think about college football in general. I can't wait to hear from you. That's it. See ya.